I have the honor of introducing our speaker and also announcing a newly endowed lecturer. Today's lecture is the inaugural Elizabeth E. Bettelheim Family Foundation Lecture. Elizabeth Eldridge Bettelheim grew up in a family that valued education, its Jewish heritage, and critical thinking. Elizabeth Bettelheim was also familiar with campus life. In the 1930s, she traveled around the United States visiting universities, newly co-educational universities, and meeting with undergraduate students. On the basis of those experiences, she wrote a book called Co-Etiquette, which explores co-educational student life on campus. It was published by Dutton. One of Elizabeth Bettelheim's daughters, Susan Bettelheim-Garfin, was an SSU sociology professor for 34 years. Susan Garfin often taught the upper division general ed course, the sociology of religion. The Elizabeth Eldridge Bettelheim Family Foundation Lecture honors the extraordinary woman for whom the lecture is named and her daughter, Susan Garfin, Professor Emerita of Sociology at Sonoma State University. Now on to our speaker. Our speaker today is a familiar face to many people at Sonoma State. It's Marc Dollinger, who is the Richard and Rhoda Goldman Chair of Jewish Studies at San Francisco State University. Marc is a historian of the Jewish American experience. He is the author or editor of numerous books. His most recent title, and I believe the title that informs his talk today, is called Black Power, Jewish Politics, Reinventing the Alliance in the 1960s. In addition to being a respected scholar, Marc is a public intellectual. I'm envious of that. You may have seen or heard Marc on NPR Code Switch, CNN, or even the NFL Network, where he commented on Deshaun Jackson's anti-Semitic Instagram posts. We're very pleased to have Marc join us today. Now, bear with me while I share his PowerPoint presentation. There we go.
Thank you. All right, I just about gave away my opening pop quiz. Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here today. Anyone heard of Kettleman City? Anyone brave to tell us anything they know about Kettleman City? Please, and what's your name?
Marc.
Oh, a good first name. I appreciate that.
I know that it's along the 5 down to Los Angeles. That's all I know.
Oh.
All right, excellent. Now I'm putting up yeah, you're on the 5. Anyone else know about Kettleman City? Yeah.
There's some really obscure restaurants there that are like famous from the 50s or something like that. I'm not
Yeah.
with another thing.
Yeah, thank you. Kettleman City, California is known for exactly 3 things. And by the way, there is your map to kind of see where it's at. It's known for gasoline, it's known for fast food, and it's known for bathrooms. Pretty much when you're driving from here to LA, that's where you're going to stop. The CHP on Thanksgiving weekend positions itself on the highway outside Kettleman City because there's so many cars it disrupts traffic. But on one particular day in my professional career, Kettleman City possessed magical transformational power. So I was teaching at a university in LA. I won't mention the name in case you've heard of Pasadena City College. College north of downtown LA. And I had a 3-year fight against campus anti-Semitism, including an op-ed published in the school newspaper that called for my firing. And in that op-ed, I was referenced as a self-hating leftist Jew. After physical threats, I ultimately had to resign my tenure. My wife Marcy and I loaded up our then preschool and kindergarten age daughters, loaded them in the car for my new job at San Francisco State University, go Gators, joining the CSU system. And only that evening, when I was unloading my books in my new SS State office, did I realize that I was now a right-wing imperial colonizing Zionist. How does one go from being a self-hating leftist Jew to a right-wing imperial colonizing Zionist? My only conclusion, it was Kettleman City. Good afternoon. I finished a book before October 7th. It's sitting in Indiana University Press waiting for an anonymous peer reviewer to finish it, but I'm taking it on tour even before the book is out. So here is a little advance notice for you. And here's the question. So the book kind of unwinds that drive, that 400-mile drive, like to go from one to the other, and how does that switch happen? Here's the basic question. How on earth can anti-Semitism exist on the college campus, a place where professors and college administrators are supposed to be the nation's, and I'll just say we are the world's smartest people? This is text heavy, but I'll just read it through and we'll talk about it as we go. On many American college campuses, white Jews get caught between the politics of the far left and rejection from the far right. And I say white Jews not to debate whether or not white Jews are white, because white Jews are white. I'm doing this to recognize the ethnic and racial diversity of American Jews and Jews of color for whom this formulation doesn't apply. Anti-Zionists on progressive campuses pressure Jewish students to check their support for Israel, while right-wing universities, and believe it or not, there are actually a few, not many, but there are a few, consider Jews to be a leftist threat to their way of doing things. At its essence, universities are caught between two contradictory definitions of their mission. Are universities a marketplace of ideas that wants all views expressed, or are we what's called the identity project that centers political activism among its diverse student population? So in my career, I've learned that Jews are part of both approaches, yet alienated from each. Professors have claimed these differing pedagogies, ultimately, I argue, to launder anti-Semitism all the same. So let's start at PCC. I shared an office with Professor Milton Brown, an extraordinary scholar, leader, and social justice advocate, a Black man a generation older than I, who actually came out to Pasadena to retire because he was the president of Malcolm X College in Chicago, which was the highest percentage Black community college in the country with the most economically depressed students, which is precisely where he wanted to place himself. And we had a shared office. So I'm in the front by the door, and then he's in the back with the window. So inevitably, we tried to schedule ourselves so that during office hours, like we wouldn't be for the other one, sometimes we're both there. And he had a member of the football team come in, a Black man, for office hours. And I should say Milton played minor league professional baseball. So he was very interested specifically on Black men in sports and athletics, and certainly around the way colleges operated with that. And the athlete starts sharing with Milton how he's going to play on Sundays, like he's going to get to the NFL. And Milton took him down and first told him he wasn't good at football. And I thought that was amazing because Milton didn't know. But then he said, if you were any good, you'd have been recruited to SC or UCLA down the road. And then he got personal with the guy, asked him about his study habits, whether he's drinking, whether he's doing drugs, if his dad's in the picture, the stress that his mom's under. And I'm just sitting there in my office, utterly scared actually for Milton, because professors should not be getting personal and insulting and destroying the hopes and dreams of our students when they come to office hours. And as soon as the student left and got far enough down the hallway that, he didn't hear, I went back to Milton and, all right, I'm tenured, so I'm going to tell you exactly what I said to him. I said, you can get your ass fired for that shit. That's what I told him. And I said he should be careful. And he smiled and looked at me and said, white boy, take a seat. And he showed the seat that the athlete was just in. And I sat down there. And I should say Milton was the former co-chair of the state of New Jersey's Black Jewish Alliance. So he had seen people like me. My field is Blacks, Jews, race relations, and the rest in American Jewish history. And though he started talking to me, and he said, I am a sociologist of race. And let me give you the data on that young man. First, I'll give you the data on whether he gets out of community college. I'm going to give the data on whether he gets into a four-year school. Cal State LA is where most of our students went. And then I'm going to tell you if he's going to get out of a four-year institution. Then I'm going to tell you if he's going to end up in jail or 6 feet under. Like, okay, that was humbling. And then he explained what his job was as a college professor, to do everything he could to get that young man a college degree and do everything he could to stop him from going to jail or die. And then Milton looked at me and smiled and said, well, what are your office hours like, Mark? I am a historian as well. So I was like, what's your thesis? Do you have an assertion? What's the evidence are you going to use to prove it? And he shared with me that he looked forward to the day that he enjoyed the privilege to have an office hour like I do. Race matters. Matters in community college, which Milton argued were designed so students of color would never get a four-year degree. Talk about that during Q&A if you're interested. He taught the sociology of race class. 90% of our students were students of color, and his entire sociology class was, why are you here in community college? Why aren't you in a four-year university? It was pretty clear he was centering his Blackness. His students were centering their racial identity. And he introduced me hold on. There's Malcolm X College, right? That's where he was president. He introduced me to what we call the Identity Project. The Identity Project argues that at the university, we must bring our identities to campus. We must bring them to our classroom, and we must integrate them into our curriculum. If we as professors want to serve students, and we want to be student-centered, then we need to recognize our students for who they are and what challenges and opportunities they face. So at PCC, I was faced with the question, should Jewish faculty, or in my case, white Jewish faculty, follow the Identity Project, or should we follow what I grew up learning, that the university is a center for critical inquiry, a marketplace of ideas, place where professors don't take political views. It's up to we teach our students how to think, not what to think. So we basically throw out as many different ideas and we debate it, and then everybody leaves. And the successful professor in the marketplace of ideas, none of our students will know our personal politics, but when the semester ends. When I was into that, because my field is Jews and politics, so it comes up with almost every time I teach, I would say, when you get your degree, email me and I'll tell you my politics, right? That was like my graduation present for them. So at PCC, I stood in the marketplace of ideas. Professor Milton Brown, was with the Identity Project, which is more popularly known as ethnic studies now, because we've had a big debate in the state of California around ethnic studies. My university has the first college of ethnic studies created in the country. So I'll use the phrases interchangeably. So here's what happened to me at PCC. We have something called the Humanities Block Program. 100 students who sign up for 5 classes together. 7 professors teach 5 classes, the same 100 students. They all like mix it around. It's coming from different disciplines, and they have a theme each semester. And the theme that semester included a unit on the Holocaust. I should say almost none of the undergraduates were Jewish. I was the only Jewish studies trained professor in the college of 30,000 students. So I had a sense of myself as a Jewishly identified person. And then some of my colleagues approached me in the hallway. They were so excited about the Holocaust unit they were going to teach because they had invited a man named Irv Rubin, head of an organization called the Jewish Defense League, to be their speaker. They were smiling and happy, and I think they looked like they were going to get points for me, you know, for going and doing this. I was horrified. The Jewish Defense League was designated by the FBI to be a domestic terrorist organization. It is right-wing, it is racist, it is fascist, and its creator, its originator was a guy named Meir Kahane. And when Meir Kahane moved to Israel, he appointed Irv Rubin to run operations for North America. And for those of you who follow Israeli politics, Netanyahu's far right-wing ministers, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, the two that are the most, you know, sort of fascist and racist in his coalition, are disciples of Meir Kahane and of the ideology of the Jewish Defense League. So I was shocked and stunned to begin with, and outraged that they were now going to turn the Holocaust into this, but also represent Jews and Holocaust education and Jewish education. And I know I'm a Holocaust education series now, and yesterday was Holocaust Remembrance Day, so this is tying in really strong. And I sat down with my beloved colleagues and said, why on earth are you doing this? And then they shared with me the reason. Jerry Springer. It turned out, Rubin, I don't know, like if you remember the Jerry Springer show, this is like the beginning of reality TV, and it was like one of the most outrageous of all of it. And he's on there with members of the KKK. And the episode, as you see, was called Clanfrontation, because they're looking for a physical altercation on live TV. That's the point of Jerry Springer. And I didn't realize that he'd come in previous years. And the students loved the spectacle of a guy who'd been on Jerry Springer and was really quite loud. And it really gave the professors popularity points from their students by coming and having the Jerry Springer show college edition being played out there. And then it got worse. And I explained to them how awful it was that they were doing that for that reason. Irv didn't even know. Irv was being clowned. And he thought, I have to imagine, that it was a serious, respectable thing to have a college professor invite you to give a lecture. And he thought that this was lifting himself up by being in a college surrounding, when in fact, it was the opposite. The marketplace of ideas. College should be a place to hear differing perspectives. This is rhetorical because I only have 3 hours, you told me, until we have to finish. Should Irv Rubin have been invited to give that talk? That to me was the question. Okay, my answer is they had every right to invite him. We have academic freedom, and you can bring whomever you want under academic freedom. You have the right to bring him. I have the right to dissent, and we'll have a debate. That's the marketplace of ideas approach. So I expressed my concern, and I expressed my opposition to his invitation. And then my colleagues came after me. And they argued that I was undermining the very mission of what a college education was supposed to be. I was denying free speech to Irv Rubin. I was denying my professor colleagues academic freedom of their own classrooms. This was a good one. I was bringing my leftist politics into the classroom for the purpose of pushing out a right-wing Jew that I didn't like. In their minds, the invitation of the leader of an FBI-designated terrorist organization was actually supporting the very mission of the college, and I was undermining. As I explained to my colleagues, you have every right to invite him, and now I'm going to tell you why I think that's a stupid thing to do. You're undermining Holocaust studies scholarship standards. When you're in the academy, you get a PhD, you write academic books, you do it because you're supposed to be at the highest levels. You're undermining Holocaust studies educational standards. We don't teach about the Holocaust by recreating Jerry Springer. That's just not what we do. They're misrepresenting American Jews to a student population that had almost no Jews in it. They were platforming a violent zealot to use the college classroom to promote his right-wing political agenda. So what do you do? I ultimately decided at that moment that I was going to protest and I was going to engage this particular issue because for me, this was anti-Semitism in a variety of different ways. And the title of the book that Amanda Berman actually came up with, I want to give her credit, is Laundering Antisemitism, which means anti-Semitism is a bad thing. It's all over society. And now it's come into the university, and these professors, who are professors and we're supposed to be smart, are cleaning it up, making it respectable, making it part of the mission of the college to promote anti-Semitism. And then that sends anti-Semitism back out into society, looking like it's a whole lot more acceptable than it was. I was tenured. And one of the lessons I learned is that tenure doesn't actually protect you as it should. And the right to dissent and academic freedom is not guaranteed if the power of the college around you is opposed to it. So my colleague in the philosophy department reached out to let me know that he was going to re-invite Irv Rubin to his logic philosophy class. Now, he said that, I think, well, really, because he just wanted, I think he just wanted to do it on face. I think he just wanted really to show that I'd lost and they had won, and he was going to come back. And he invited me to debate him in his class. Now, that's an interesting question, but I said no, because I'm not interested in debating somebody who I don't actually think is a professor and an academic, and I thought that was just going to be a show. So because I wouldn't debate, Rubin took the hour and discussed the subject of Professor Dollinger's cowardice for having refused to debate him. And then the professor changed the philosophy final exam to a single question. Was Professor Dollinger a coward for refusing to debate? Right. So literally that's awful. But if we talk about the meaning and purpose of a college education, then these are the senior white faculty who are making the statement with me. In Jewish tradition, observant Jews are not permitted to eat pork. A pig is considered like the most unkosher animal. So on his website, he had the pig of the week. And every week he put a photograph of whoever he thought the pig of the week was. And I won the honor to be pig of the week. And my picture went up. And then I got an email from a member of the JDL from the Midwest holding an assault rifle in front of a helicopter that said JDL on it. And the email said, do I need to come to Pasadena to take care of business? Which I considered a threat. When my dean, Dr. Gretchen Anderson, and I put her picture up here because she is my hero, the first female dean in the history of our division at PBC, she refused to approve the visit. When that happened, she was removed from her deanship and then fired by the college president. And when she approached the college president to ask why she lost her deanship, the president told her, because you supported Marc. At PCC, defend a Jewish faculty member and you get fired. And there was a newspaper article that came out. I think, yeah, this was passing to Star News, so it was already hitting sort of the local press as we got to this point. I received physical threats of violence, and when that happens, I went to the police chief at the community college, and I wanted an escort on campus for fear of what's going to happen to me in this organization. I don't want to typecast police, but he was 6'2", 250 pounds, as much as a good old boy as you can imagine. I told him my story, and here's what he said in reply. Did I ever tell you what it was like for me to bake challah with my bubby? I will translate the cultural import of that question. He was telling me that he was Jewish, going back to the Yiddish name for his grandmother and the ceremonial bread which Jewish people eat Friday night to begin the Sabbath. So I looked at him shocked and said, "You're Jewish?" And he smiled and said, "I am. The world needs more Irv Rubins, and you will not get a police escort." I went back to my office to talk to Milton. And I said, "I just want you to know, I know I'm a white man in America, and I know when I walk off this campus, it's going to be a whole lot different, but I just want to let you know that going to the police for protection and having the police increase the threat to you is not a very good feeling to have." The marketplace of ideas failed at PCC. Thanks to Milton, though, there was another approach to what it means to go off to college, the Identity Project, ethnic studies. Milton taught me that my Jewishness mattered. He taught me that the college campus was not a third-person center of critical inquiry. He taught me that the university is not an apolitical place. It was instead a reflection of larger social realities. Anti-Semitism exists on the political right. Anti-Semitism exists on our campus. And as Milton challenged me, was I to continue pretending that I could keep politics, meaning my Jewish identity, out of my workplace, out of my classroom? Would I follow his lead? Would I embrace my identity as a Jew? And would I join the Identity Project, the ethnic studies approach to college? He intervened when his student athlete needed to know a little bit more about what it meant to be a Black man in America. Was I going to intervene against this retaliation campaign? Because I knew what it meant to be an identified Jew on this campus. No surprise at this point, because the book is written, I joined Milton in that. And he had this idea to create San Gabriel Valley's first ever town hall meeting on the topic of diversity. And when I did the first version of the book before October 7th, I didn't put the dates in because I didn't want anyone to know this is from the year 2000. This is a long time ago. Now I put all the dates in because I want everyone to know, that this was happening a generation earlier. My wife, as I've been writing and rewriting the book, I get to this point and she's like, "You can't do this to people. Like you got to have something positive here. Find something redemptive." So this is chapter 3. Something really special started to happen at about this moment in the drama. More and more of my colleagues reached out. Okay, that's not true. Colleagues of color reached out. Women reached out. LGBTQ plus colleagues reached out. And when they did, they shared with me their own horrible campus stories. Women spoke about sexual harassment and even sexual assault. Black and brown faculty about the racism they faced. And I have to tell you, hearing their stories, theirs were so much worse than mine. And I never knew. And I never knew until this anti-Semitism and my willingness to go public earned their trust, and they felt that they could even tell me that story and bring me in to the crowd. So Milton narrated this for me, like as all this happened. We were just going back and forth. And he said to me, "This is about anti-Semitism and Jews, but this is actually about a whole lot more." He said, "This is about how all of us on the outside of power face discrimination." He also let me know that he was stunned, and my other faculty of color were stunned that they were doing this to a white man. And they're like, if you as a white man are facing this, can you even imagine the increased risk that the rest of us face? And he asked if I would universalize the struggle. Would I invite others to share their pain along with me? Could we all join together to try to make a campus a better place for everyone? And of course, the answer was yes. And with this, I was all in with the Identity Project. My Jewishness at PCC mattered just like Milton's Blackness. Ethnic studies was the way to go. Jews must be encouraged to bring their whole Jewish selves to campus and to express ourselves without compromise. Milton's Black studies and my Jewish studies joined forces, and we had the town hall meeting. It was great. I mean, that's not great, like in general, but it was great. What happened? 300 people showed up. 40 community-based organizations in San Gabriel Valley co-sponsored. Even the president of the college showed up because it got to be so big, the politics of him not showing up was going to be even worse. I went up and talked about anti-Semitism. Milton talked about racism. Dr. Gretchen Anderson talked about sexism. We had the head of the local ADL chapter, and this was interesting. This is not in my notes, but I got a call from the police chief of the city of Pasadena. And he said, I want to be on the panel. And he was Armenian, the first Armenian police chief in Pasadena. And I said, I'm sorry, chief, there's no spot left. We're full. He wanted to talk about the Armenian genocide. And he said, I don't think you understand. I'm the police chief of Pasadena. And I said, yes, sir, we just found a space for you. And we asked everyone to speak from their heart, not to speak from any professional place or any organizational place. We just wanted to hear everyone's stories. Lessons learned from the PCC experience. Professors could launder anti-Semitism by hiding behind the marketplace of ideas approach to justify abusive decisions. I learned that ethnic studies, the Identity Project, can be very helpful for campus Jews. I learned that sometimes it was my fellow Jews who posed the biggest campus challenge. Not only was that police chief Jewish, but when they fired Gretchen, they handed the form to a Jewish dean and ordered her to sign it, and she did. Now, I was mad at her for signing because I thought she was selling out. In my older age, I have more compassion because she just saw her colleague get fired, and for her, the decision is, do I get fired or take my stand as a Jewish dean? And I just have to empathize with the anti-Semitism of that moment that she had to make that decision. I learned that not even tenure protects Jews who dissent. I learned that the smartest place college still does dumb things. And I resigned my tenure and I moved to San Francisco State University, where I was hired as the Richard and Rhoda Goldman Chair in Jewish Studies and Social Responsibility. That's important because as then President Robert Corrigan, now of blessed memory, sadly explained to me, this is the first endowed chair in SS State's history. It's in Jewish social justice because there's so much anti-Semitism on our campus that we need a faculty member trained in Jewish social justice to offer another opinion when the anti-Semites come out. And if we hire you and you accept this position, you will be expected to be public in your fights against anti-Semitism. He sat me down in his office and said, are you ready for that? And I said, oh, I have a story for you, when I gave him the 5-minute version of PCC. So San Francisco State University in 1968 had the longest student strike in US educational history. As a consequence of the student strike, the College of Ethnic Studies was created. My mind, after what was then 7 years in Pasadena, this was my place. I was ready. If anything, PCC taught me the limits of the Center of Critical Inquiry. Milton taught me the importance of identity politics, of ethnic studies, and my Jewishness now mattered. They hired me because I was Jewish. I was ready for SF State. No, I wasn't ready for SF State, as it turns out. SF State is a social justice-centered university. We do all we can to be anti-racist. We want to educate our students to go out and change the world for the better. There's a Hebrew expression for this. It's called tikkun olam. It's very popular in American Jewish circles now to use that phrase for social justice. So I ask rhetorically, isn't this exactly what universities should be doing for our undergraduates and graduate students to teach them to make the world a better place? And what if you think, as many leftists do, that Zionism is racism? If you believe that Zionism is racism, to follow the social justice mission of anti-racism demands that you be an anti-Zionist too. If the Identity Project is meant to bring social justice to the college classroom, then professors are obligated to bring anti-Zionism to their classroom, even if their class has nothing to do with the Mideast conflict. And I get a lot of Jewish leaders calling me really upset when one of my colleagues at SS State has brought anti-Zionism into their classroom. They want him fired, you know. Why do you want him fired? You know, they violated the marketplace of ideas. They're not letting other opinions into the classroom. And then I explained to them that their demand, their Zionist demand that I try to get the anti-Zionist fired is itself the Identity Project. It's itself ethnic studies. It's taking a particular political view and inserting it. So I said, the moment you want me to defend your Zionist position, you are actually defending the anti-Zionist position at the same time. They don't like me at that point, and sometimes the phone just clicks, and that's the end of that. So having office hours at SS State, and two of my students came in, Israeli students, and they were upset. They were concerned. One of them was crying, and they were not interested in talking about my class. They were interested in talking about this. The president of the Palestinian student group on campus had put up on Facebook a picture of himself holding a knife. And the caption said, "I seriously cannot get over how much I love this blade. It is the sharpest thing I own and cuts through everything like butter. And just holding it makes me want to stab an Israeli soldier." We had close to 30,000 students at that time. And as it worked out, those two Israeli students were in the same section of a poli-sci class with him. And they wouldn't go back to that class for fear that they would be stabbed. As I reflected on the moment, writing the book, it dawned on me that they should have gone to their poli-sci professor, because that's the one who's responsible for the safety of students in their classroom. But they came to me. And I think they came to me because I was Jewish, and because I'm Zionist, and because I'm friendly, and because they trust me, and because they believe that I will protect them. And of course, we instantly went to campus police and did all the things we have to do to make sure that they were protected. And then I realized, as I was putting the book together, that Milton's job was to protect his student from dying a Black man at PCC. And my job was now to prevent my students from dying as Zionists at SF State. And then I realized that I had the parallel for the Identity Project and how ethnic studies refracted in both ways. My PCC experience had just been flipped upside down. I went from a multiracial, diverse group of colleagues who rallied around me, because I was a Jew suffering anti-Semitism, to a place where my Zionism apparently had turned me and my Israeli students into racist, imperialists, and colonizers. It came into focus when we invited the then mayor of Jerusalem, Nir Barkat, to campus to speak. I want you to know that Nir Barkat is a right-wing Likudnik. He has a ministerial position in the current Netanyahu government. This guy's politics could not be more different than probably most every Jewish student at SF State. But the way that Hillel, that invited him, set it up is they had an entire year of different kinds of Zionists coming to campus to express different perspectives on Jewish nationalism, where they disagreed with one another as much as any anti-Zionist would probably disagree with them. And I did a great job because, I will be honest here, if the mayor of Jerusalem's coming to the San Francisco Bay Area to visit a college, they're going to Berkeley or Stanford. They're not coming to State. And if you come into state, you know you're going to get protested. So we kind of imagined that in a certain way, he was setting us up. And he actually wanted to protest, right? For whatever political reasons that would make him look good. But still, having the mayor of Jerusalem come on campus, I think, is what college education is about. So here's what Hillel said. For every minute you talk, students will get 1 minute to ask you questions. It's there for an hour, so you get to talk for 30 minutes and student Q&A for 30 minutes. He had a microphone here about 7-8 feet away was a second microphone. And he had Palestinian students and their allies protesting. Then they entered the room and sat down. And our associate director from Hillel, Rachel Nielsen-Ralston, who was actually raised in Sonoma County in Santa Rosa, is the one in charge. And she points to the Palestinian students and their allies and says, you are going to have an opportunity to challenge the right-wing Likudic mayor of Jerusalem face to face. I thought that was awesome. I mean, what does it mean to get a college education? What does it mean to go to state? What does it mean to be social justice minded? Bring in the mayor of Jerusalem and let the Palestinian students on your campus challenge him and see how the exchange goes. That would never happen in Jerusalem. And it can only happen on a college campus halfway around the world. SF State had it worked out, apparently. They created a free speech zone outside. You had to RSVP. There's all sorts of rules just for safety and security when that happens. But the protesters decided when Barkat got about 1.5 minutes into his speech that they were going to protest. And so now what I'm going to do is actually just read you from the book to give you the description. They chanted, "Long live the Intifada," a reference to the violent uprising that witnessed Palestinian suicide bombers blowing up Israeli restaurants, cafes, and universities, targeting and killing Israeli civilians. When the Jews assembled, that chant could be read as a threat of violence, a call by protesters for physical harm, if not the death of Mayor Barkat and anyone present who identified as a Zionist. Then protesters pointed at Barkat and with a rhythmic chant let them know, "Look, we don't want you on our campus." They followed that with the more pointed, and this is a direct quote, "Get the fuck off our campus." Over and over again, get the fuck off our campus, get the fuck off our campus. Administrators and campus police needed a justification for intervention. These chants offered it. Mayor Barkat had to pause his speech and wait as protesters continued their chants. 15 minutes in, without any sort of police action to limit them, a few protesters actually left the room, walked to their group's office in the Student Union building, and returned with bullhorn loudspeakers, which they deployed at a deafening level. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Long live the Intifada. Get the fuck off our campus. There was no hope of hearing the mayor, even with the microphone at full volume. Mayor Barkat had no choice to end his prepared remarks. He stepped away from the microphone, grabbed a chair, and moved as close as he could to the students trying to listen. The Jerusalem leader sat in one corner of the room trying to speak to interested students, while protesters dominated the rest of the space at those decibel levels. He yelled as loud as he could towards the undergraduates, trying in some way to connect with them. The most chilling part of the day, though, occurred after Barkat left the room. With Jewish students huddled in the front of the lecture hall, Mayor Barkat said his goodbyes and walked through the exit at the rear of the conference center room. Protesters followed him to the door, continuing their chants, and once he left, they started high-fiving, fist-pumping, and screams of celebration. They had, in fact, prevented the mayor of Jerusalem from speaking. The heckler's veto ruled the day. And then, the protesters made a 180-degree turn so that they faced the students at the front of the room. And I'll just show you where the Barkat was at the front of the room. Pointing with their fingers towards a group of Jews, they screamed repeatedly, "Get the fuck off our campus." The message was as clear as it was chilling. This protest was not limited to a Likudnik Israeli mayor of Jerusalem. It now expanded to include Jewish undergraduates themselves. The protesters sought a campus of ideological purity, which in this case could only mean the absence of Jewish students. At that moment, it ceased to be a protest against a controversial political figure and became a blatant anti-Semitic act against campus Jews. In the protesters' mind, Zionists should not enjoy the right to study at SF State. Rattled, fearful, and visibly upset, the Jewish students took some time in the now empty room to gather themselves and check in with one another. I let them know they were witness to history. As if these 20-somethings needed to know about the impact of social media, I still told them that photos and videos of the previous hour were sure to go viral. They would be centered in much larger debates over free speech, over the right to dissent, over the ways in which university campuses, and ours in particular, continue in their anti-Zionist and now anti-Semitic ways. Offering some humor to ease a tense moment, I let one of the students, Brooke, and Brooke gave me permission to use her name, I let her know that someday she would be able to tell her grandchildren that during her college days, the mayor of Jerusalem got within an inch of her face and screamed at the top of his lungs, "What's your major?" The administration response was awful. They defended the shoutdown. The dean of students falsely claimed it was protected speech. In a series of meetings with Jewish leaders, the then university president, not the one we have now, said that Jewish campus climate was not a presidential concern. He ordered us not to bring up the topic with him anymore. He asserted that Jews took more of his time than any other campus group. That's not true. I told him we're actually number 3. I told him the 2 groups ahead of us. He told a Jewish newspaper that not all Zionists were. He advanced an anti-Semitic trope about Jewish power to the 6 biggest leaders of Bay Area Jewish life. And when I did him a favor to tell him what he had just done, to give him a chance to walk back his comments, all he did was nodded his head yes to reaffirm what he had said. He told me that protecting Jewish students from physical assault was nothing more than, and these were his words, a political issue. So to compare to PCC, at PCC, I was the right-wingers' view of anti-Semitism. I was powerless. I was an oddball. The president of PCC called me an oddball to my face. I was a force destroying their community and their campus culture. I was part of a multiracial coalition, which is bent on challenging the power of senior white faculty and administrators. But at SF State, I became the left-wingers' view of anti-Semitism. There I was too powerful. There I was leveraging that power to destroy SF State's anti-racist culture. I was bringing Zionism, racism in their mind to this anti-racist university. I was separating myself from any sort of multiracial coalition because I was a fully identified Jew, because I was a Zionist. At PCC, I opposed a right-wing Jewish speaker because that invitation revealed Catholic anti-Semitism. But at SF State, I demanded a right-wing Jewish speaker come because forbidding him would have been anti-Semitic. Yet on each campus, I was cast as a threat to the mission of the university, whether that was the marketplace of ideas at PCC or the Ethnic Studies Identity Project at SF State. At PCC, I ran to the Identity Project thanks to Milton, protect Jewish students. But at SF State, I ran away from it because of its anti-Zionism. Epilogue. Actually, I have another epilogue first. 3 weeks after I arrived at SF State, Steve Gretchen Anderson called and asked if I'd heard the news, which I had not. Herb Rubin had been arrested by the FBI. for conspiracy to blow up a mosque in Culver City, and the offices of an Arab American member of Congress, Darrell Issa of Orange County. They found more than a dozen weapons in his bedroom. And when he took delivery of the detonator caps, they went in for the arrest. On the morning of his first day of trial, he took a leap from the third floor balcony of LA County Jail and died by suicide. His co-defendant, who was found guilty and sent to the penitentiary, 4 days after he arrived at the penitentiary, was murdered by white supremacists in the yard with rocks to the head, 4 years to the day of Irv Rubin's death. At PCC, the administration used the Center for Critical Inquiry approach to marginalize Jews and deny us protection. At SF State, the administration used the Ethnic Studies Identity Project approach to marginalize Jews and deny us protection from anti-Semitism. For the anthropologists in the room, Jews are liminal. We are in an awkward space between it all. Sometimes we're the Identity Project, sometimes we're the Center of Critical Inquiry. We're getting anti-Semitism from both sides of the aisle. We're either too marginal or we're too powerful. And as a professor of Jewish studies, I think we're the ones to study, we're the ones to learn from when it comes to understanding the complexities and the implications of what it is to get higher education, of what it means to put one's identity in the workplace, and to understand how anti-Semitism can work from both sides. My lesson, professors get academic freedom. There also needs to be academic responsibility linked to that. And it's always nice when we have senior administrators willing to take public stands, as they often don't. This is Malcolm X Plaza. This is a center of political activism on the SF State campus. And after October 7th, the president of SF State called me and asked that I not attend an anti-Zionist rally, which was going to be held in the plaza. And I explained to the president that I was hired with his chair for the purpose of bearing witness on the pro and anti side. I go to all sides, I go to everything, because unfortunately, if there's going to be trouble, I want to be able to say with my own eyes I saw it. And out of her concern for me, she said, "You're a public figure and you're known. And we are doing everything to protect the Palestinian students' right to protest. And we're doing everything to protect those of you who, may feel threatened by that. And I don't want you there." So I told her I usually go there because I never trusted the administration before, certainly her predecessor. And I appreciated the moment, and I told her that I would not be there. So it's a bit of a visual, but my office is here. My 2 o'clock class is here. And the protest, the plaza is in the middle. So after lunch that I had at my office, I walked a long way around, to get to my building. And when I'm walking up here, I'm looking over to the right because I want to know how many people are there. Can I hear what they're saying? Like whatever I can do as I'm just walking far away. And I hear a voice from my left-hand side that says, "Hello, Marc." And I turn around, and there's a middle-aged Black man standing in the bushes. It took me about a second and a half to realize, and I share this with his permission, that that's Reggie Parsons, the chief of police of SF State. I said hello and kept walking. It just took me a minute to realize what was happening. That he was there in plain clothes because they were trying to de-escalate, because it's really serious business when you're talking about police on campus. And he wanted me to know, because he could clearly see I was not looking at him, I'm looking at the other way, that this university is a place that is going to make it safe for everyone to express political opinions from all points of view, and that I would be safe like everybody else would be safe. As my wife explained to me, because I didn't quite get it at the time, at PCC, a white Jewish police chief refused to protect me. At SF State, a Black non-Jewish police chief did. And I got to believe that Milton would like that, and I got to believe that at least there's some hope there. Thank you.
Okay, so as always, we open it to questions, and it's the privilege of being a student in the course that you have the right to the first question. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Yeah, Julia.
Hi. Do you have any suggestions for people who see perhaps even the current conversation around, say, Israel and Palestine and what's going on with the conflict and with the ceasefire? Is there a way to be a quote unquote good ally to not only Palestinian students on campus who are obviously experiencing a lot of pain and heartache, but also to Jewish students on campus who are experiencing a different kind, perhaps the flip side of that pain and heartache? If you have anything to say on that.
All right, first I'll give you my honest answer, and then I'll see if I can come up with a pretend one. Administrators on my campus, and I know with all this, I get calls from, from other universities, and they're asking the same question. And to the administrators, I want them to know there's a war, and a whole lot of people are dead, and it's awful. And I just want to say that as a statement of fact. At this point, I'm not giving you a personal political position. It is really hard to bring people together when you're in the middle of a war. Whether we're talking about Zionists on campus, Palestinians, Arabs, allies, whomever it is. And in the real world, I said to them, this war's got to end as fast as it can end. And only when it ends can universities in a meaningful way start trying to figure out what on earth they're going to do. So here's the fake answer, which hopefully might mean something. To the extent to which people are not personally, individually, and emotionally invested to the point of the pain being too much, like honestly say, really, are you going to sit down with somebody on the other side right now? This is why I go to the center of critical inquiry in the marketplace of ideas. My argument for SF State, so I've announced to you I'm in Jewish studies and I'm a Zionist, right? And my argument with my Jewish studies students, and I teach Zionism, is that they got to get to the College of Ethnic Studies and take a course from one of our anti-Zionist professors. And I tell our administration, who come to me because they're concerned about campus anti-Semitism and they like kind of a reality check from me. I said, I don't think there's a university on planet Earth where an undergraduate can be better educated on Israel and Palestine, on Zionism and anti-Zionism than SF State. We have a Department of Jewish Studies. We have 3 endowed chairs. We have an endowed chair in Israel Studies. We have the nation's first College of Ethnic Studies, and we have the leaders of the Palestinian intellectual movement on our campus. This, to me, is the gift of what it means to go off to college. I mean, that's the phrase. When you're growing up, did your parents or grandparents say, when you go off to college, what does that mean? So my hope would be that all of my students at State would take every class they can, at least, and use this moment to learn as many different perspectives. Because the truth is, for most undergrads, once you graduate, go off to do whatever you're going to do next, you're probably not going to be engaging this particular political issue unless you're otherwise involved or engaged in it. So it's a rare moment to take advantage.
Yeah, Elena, right? Yeah, tell me your name.
Ella.
Ella, sorry, I knew it started with an E.
So in the two experiences you described, you mentioned a difference in place. I was wondering if maybe you could speak to maybe a difference in time period, social, political context, and what you see in the future or want to see in the future.
And the last one's what I see what?
What you want to see in the future.
In the future, okay. I'll give you my snarky answer first at the end and then serious. I am an historian. It's tough enough to predict the past, so I can't figure out the future. As that PCC ended in 2001, because I interviewed right after 9/11, come up to State. And State started the next week, like as soon as I got there. And it's been pretty continuous. So I don't actually think the time matters so much. I finished the book and was about to send it in to the press. And my early editor said, no one's going to read your book because what you wrote is so awful, they'll never believe you stayed as a professor after having done what you've done. So I had to go and write the book as this is the exception that defies the rule, and you're not going to have it that bad. And then October 7th happened, and CNN's got campus anti-Semitism as the lead. I went back and rewrote the book to say, see, time doesn't matter. Even 20 years ago, it was happening, and now the book is supposed to, kind of be prophetic. In terms of trying to figure out where to go going forward, one of my points here is to look at the liminality of Jews because I'm an academic in Jewish studies. I think that can be helpful across ethnic studies as well, less so about in white America. I'm very interested in the social construction of race and how white Jews fit into it. Because after Auschwitz and the death camps, which we're now commemorating this week, no Jew who looks like me can be white. I get very excited when I teach. So, got back on. The Nazis considered white Jews subhuman, vermin, and justified genocide because you're not killing actual people. It is rumored that the state of Israel, created in 1948, has nuclear weapons. It is rumored they have 200 nuclear bombs. Now, Israel was created, so Auschwitz was liberated in 1945. Israel was created in 48. Israel did not get the atomic bomb in 1948, but for the sake of argument, you can't say that Jews are powerless when they have a military that's capable of destroying the world. So now we'll talk about sort of PTSD in the Jewish community after the genocide. It was 3 years from Auschwitz to a Jewish military, and just a couple decades from Auschwitz to the atomic bomb. And I think what's happening a lot in contemporary American Jewish life is we're still working that out. We're on the one hand understanding that white Jews are enjoying a whole lot of privilege and power, disproportionate, even as that's an anti-Semitic trope. At the same time, that in the lived experience of people today, and this lecture is about, the genocide of the Jews. So my hope going forward, what I work in the white Jewish community on, is having them hold both of those. And when they're going into diverse community spaces, to recognize that they need to be holding both of those in order to create stronger senses of allyship. There's going to be a percentage of people on the far left and the far right who will never change their mind. And it's, in my mind, no, just don't waste your time. I like to think that there's going to be a lot of other folks who are open to education, and I'm a professor, so I go with the education. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Cassidy. When you were telling the story about how the officer denied you protection, did you ever take action on that officer and report him? And then did you ever end up getting the protection?
No, so I did not take action. My friends, I had friends who said, sue your college, But I was with Milton, like I go to Milton every day, and he's like, welcome to my last Tuesday, So part of me was understanding as a white man that this was an opportunity for me to learn, and I wanted to do that. I'll tell you how old this was. I got something called a cell phone, and it has a button that's a pre-call. Like you push the button, and it just dials the number you've set. And I called the city of Pasadena police. And I said, do you have jurisdiction? And I told them what happened. And they said, put us in as your dial. Always have your phone on you, because in those days, we didn't always carry the phone. So I had that. This leaked to another part of this was I kept it to myself, partly just because I was afraid of security. And part of it was this was a fight among professors. This was not about the students. And then faculty of color and female faculty came to be pissed off at me when they found out what was happening. And they said, you must bring this to the students. This is actually the point, right? So once I opened it up to the students, then it became known. And my students in my US history survey approached me and said that they would be my escort. And my undergrads surrounded me as I walked on campus and off campus. That just forever changed my view of, like, every undergraduate to me, it's like one of those that went to do that. So that was intense. That felt good. But I also knew it was time for me to resign, look for a new job.
So, Marc, it occurs to me that your story is a modern day American rendition of Zygmunt Bauman's observation that to anti-Semites, Jewish identity is always slippery. But, he calls this the viscosity of Jewish identity, that in interwar Europe, Jews could be greedy capitalists, the puppeteers of economic forces nobody understands, or they could be conniving atheistic Bolsheviks. And so you experienced a kind of similar dichotomy in anti-Semitism. I did find your view of the university, despite your epilogue, very pessimistic. And I wonder, what hope do you see for what we do here in higher ed? I mean, are we always bound to walk the tightrope between the marketplace of ideas and the identity project? What do you make of time, manner, place?
Time, place, and manner.
Time, place, manner.
So first of all, I'm sad that you had it as negative. I thought I had it as positive. Now I have to reread the book and make sure see how I do that. I believe in the identity project. The notion of the marketplace of ideas is absent any social inequity. So, like, you want to have truth? Truth is, I'm with Identity Project and Ethnic Studies. That's where I land. Because I understand that when I say the Center for Critical Inquiry in the marketplace of ideas, that's code for whoever has power at that university to determine what's in the market and what's out of the market. And that is actually refracting on race, gender, and whatever other identity category you want to have. So then it pushes it to the next step, which is, what is it to be committed to the Identity Project when there is a dominant political belief amongst that cohort that does not have you as part of that? So that would be where my sadness comes from. Boy, what a great opportunity to get to spend 4 years, or in our case with our students, sometimes 7 years on campus to get to learn and grow in ways you never did before you got there, and you may not ever have it again. So that's for my own.
What do you make of our new CSU policy on campus protests?
On time, place, and manner?
Yeah.
So time, place, and manner is the code for the legal rules around when and how you can protest and not protest. It changes every 2 or 3 years. I think it is more politically informed than anything else. And as the pendulum is swinging on who has the power in Sacramento or Long Beach, where our headquarters are for the CSU, then we're going to see how those rules are changing. I like to apply the rules to, like, why are we going off to college? So at SF State, in an earlier version, we could physically separate the two sides when there's going to be a rally. And that was done for the purpose of making sure we don't have a physical fight going on between them. And each side has an opportunity to say what they want to say back and forth, but the emotions are so intense, we don't want them literally getting in each other's faces. And then we had a lawsuit filed and they won. And the lawsuit said we can't limit physical space. So now Time, Place, and Manner has Palestinian students who have members of their family who are dead in Gaza, right up next to Jewish students and Israeli students who have cousins fighting in the IDF. That to me is not a good formula for the realities of humanity. And universities have, at the local university, we have no choice but to follow.
Yeah, please introduce
Well,
yourself.
my name's Larry, and I just had a question. Mentioned about the laundering of anti-Semitism and your desire to be present either way it went, to see and view the facts of this and stuff like that. I was just wondering, I personally don't view the Gaza incident as a war. I think that's mischaracterized. It's, in my opinion, it's obviously that it's the result of current genocide after years and decades of isolation to these people. And I was just wondering, at what point will yourself or other members of your community admit that what is going on is actual genocide? Or will we get into a whitewashing of this, where we arrive at a position of the denial of the Armenian genocide? And so where we will start having lecture series based on the denial of the Palestinian genocide.
Right. So my talk today is the story of two experiences I had on two campuses that refracted in opposite ways. The book was done before October 7th. I did write a short epilogue because I turned the book in about 2 or 3 weeks later, and that's where that stops. So for the sake of the discipline of the evening, and the fact that my professional charge is to tell the story that I told it, and to focus on really, ethnic studies versus marketplace of ideas, anti-Semitism from both sides, and the rest of it, I'm going to hold off on that question because that will just bring us to an entirely different place. That
Marc, can I respond? So Larry, I appreciate the question. And you did something there which was extraordinary. You said, in my opinion, it is genocide. And you respectfully stated your case for that. I think I'm going to leave aside my own views. I think reasonable people can agree or disagree on that. It is a valid topic of discussion, and it is something we will take up in this lecture series in April when Usama Makdisi visits from UC Berkeley. So I hope you'll be there. We're not whitewashing anything.
And if I can, actually, there is, I think, a response I can give that maybe relates to a bit of what you're saying. When I took the job at SF State, I received unsolicited letters from my colleagues telling me not to go, right, because of the anti-Zionism. They sent me newspaper clippings of articles over the years and the rest of it. I'm 22 years in at this point, and I will be retiring from SF State. And my ethic as a professor at a university is that every single student on campus is my student, whether or not they're in my class. So the way I teach and the way I operate in a professional way is, well, one thing Milton taught me is I'm not going to get around the fact that I'm Jewish and a Zionist, so own it and say it out loud. And every Palestinian student on campus who is anti-Zionist and protesting the mayor and the rest of it is my student. And it is my obligation to protect them as I would protect any other student. And then the next step on that is I'm brought in by our administration and other administrations, usually when outside Jewish leaders are upset and we're trying to navigate and negotiate, and I'm usually the one that goes to the Jewish leaders. And I said, the job of the university president is to be the president of every single student. Now they're going to get into a question of marketplace of ideas or political advocacy, like and how that's going to play out. And then I say, that's what I do too, as a professor. President Lynn Mahoney of SF State, when we had an encampment, when our encampment came, she was challenged to have a live Instagram feed negotiation in the encampment. The first university president in the country, they challenged her to that. And she came down from the 5th floor of the admin building, got a folding chair, sat at the encampment, and they had cameras rolling, and she negotiated. And a line that I like, and this maybe answers some of the other questions. She said, I am not the Secretary of State of the United States. I'm not going to take positions that are going to divide my own students against each other, right? Then she said, nor am I Secretary of State of San Francisco State. And I like how she played that. And that in her mind, that's the job of a president. In my mind, even though I'm a Jewish studies professor, it is my job to protect every single one of the students. and to be in that place. And I do get critique for that, as you might imagine, from some, in the outside university community, but that's a decision I made professionally.
So there's another question over here. Yeah, please introduce yourself.
My name is Max Fletcher, and first off, I want to say thank you so much for being here with us today. And I agree completely with how horrific this war is, but you stopped right at when the student protests began at SF State around October 7th. So my question really is, how can we come together as human beings before this war ends?
Yeah. I'll do historian speak for a moment. We have something called a constructed narrative. Whether it's our family history, our personal history, or the history of whatever our group is. Narrative is the story we tell. Constructed is we make it up. But the thing is, even though we construct it and make it up, it's all true. And there are different constructed narratives. And what's happening is these constructed narratives are coming crashing together. So if you bring even a progressive Zionist with their constructed narrative about what's going on right now, and then you offered another narrative on what's going on right now, you'd have no idea you're describing the same event. To the extent to which in humanity we can bring people together, it would be to hear the other one's narrative with empathy and trying to understand not if it's right or wrong, because I guarantee you it will be wrong from your point of view, but how it is that person has constructed that narrative from their own perspective, much as possible.
We have a question in the back. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm just curious. So you have said that you're a Zionist. How do you view critiques of Zionism as a political concept? Do you view that as inherently anti-Semitic? And how do you feel about organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace who think that it's contradictory to Jewish ideals?
So she asks, how do you view critiques of Zionism? Are they anti-Semitic by nature? And what about the group Jewish Voices for Peace?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So about a week ago, my ears plugged up like when you're on an airplane before they unplug, so I have trouble hearing. Sorry, from the back row. So I gave this lecture yesterday in San Francisco. There was a senior citizen group, that wanted it. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism per se. In Jewish religious tradition, the Jewish people are not allowed to return to the land of Israel after the year 70, when the Romans kicked out the Jews, until the Messiah comes. Therefore, no Messiah, no Israel. Now, to be honest, almost all Orthodox Jews have actually found a rabbinic textual way to have a state of Israel even without the Messiah, but there remains a small group of ultra-Orthodox Jews for whom there can be no modern state of Israel without the Messiah. So it's clear they're not anti-Semitic. Second group, and this is where I get into trouble, but it's okay because I do have tenure. Zionism is rooted in the belief that Jews cannot live in the diaspora because either they are unsafe or because the only way Jewish cultural productivity can occur is when you have a critical mass of Jews together living in the same spot. So a Jewish person who chooses exile, who chooses to remain in the diaspora, is working against the foundational idea of what Zionism is. So when Zionism, modern political Zionism, started in the 1880s, is when it started to get big, Eastern European Jews, well, I'll give you a number. In the late 19th and early 20th century, about 40,000 Eastern European Jews went to what was then Ottoman Palestine. 40,000. 2 million came to the US. So if you're going to vote with your feet, one could argue that was an anti-Zionist move. In 1948, the State of Israel was created, and by the classical definition of exile as oppression and as the recreation of the modern state of Israel as the opportunity, there should have been a mass migration of American Jews to Israel. That did not occur. So one could technically argue that every single American Jew today is an anti-Zionist by virtue of the fact that they're here. That's an argument. Now, I have to say, because I know we're being projected and people are going to get mad at me. In about 1915, Louis Brandeis, who became the first Jewish justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, who was the president of the American Zionist Association, which is interesting. How can you be the leading Zionist and on the U.S. Supreme Court without a dual loyalty concern? Wrote a famous article where he redefined American Zionism to say that that's supporting the movement to create a Jewish state, but you don't have to live there. And as soon as he wrote that article, most all American Jews declared themselves Zionist in order to be there. So taking it to the next step, I think if you're Palestinian, you have a right to be pissed off. And you're not anti-Semitic, you're just angry. Now, if you use an anti-Semitic trope in your anger, that is anti-Semitism. But we have a war. And we have two groups of people who are claiming the same piece of land and they're killing each other. And in the most simplistic humanitarian way, like, how long is it going to take and how many people are going to die before everyone realizes neither side is going away? Figure it out. So that's not anti-Semitic. So I tend to be more conservative or limited in my understanding, and I'll add one more part here. The phrase was not invented until 1879 by Wilhelm Marr, a German journalist. And he wrote it as part of the eugenics movement, where he argued that, now, by the way, Arabs are Semites too, but Wilhelm Marr did not mean Arabs when he said anti-Semitic. He just meant the Jewish Semites. And that was part of scientific anti-Semitism and scientific racism and scientific misogyny as well, that said that in this case, Jews were genetically inferior. In the ancient and medieval period, if the Christians got mad at the Jews, they were ultimately mad because they didn't accept Jesus as the Messiah. So technically, in the ancient and medieval period, when Jew hatred happened, you could solve it by converting to Christianity. Now, if you're Jewish, that's not a good solution because you want to stay Jewish. But the upset was you rejected Jesus. What Wilhelm Marr did in 1879 with the word anti-Semitism, he made it genetic. The only resolution to genetic inferiority is genocide. And that's what the Nazis did. So when I use the language of anti-Semitism, it must be modern, it must be rooted in eugenics, and it must demand genocide of the Jews. That is a very strict definition. Most people call it Jew hatred is anti-Semitism, you know, and the phrase is just thrown around a lot. It's tough as an academic to try to posit that very limited definition because people are just used to using the word all.
Okay, so we have time for one more question. We're already past the end, and so this gentleman in front, please introduce yourself.
I'm not a student. I'm a retired professor and a refugee from Vienna.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. And specifically, I want to ask you, because you made a point that the mayor of Jerusalem was right-wing Likud.
Yeah.
And I think that really didn't matter because those students who were prepared to interfere with free speech, which is so critical in a university environment, that if Teddy Kollek, who's a left-wing socialist mayor, had spoken, it would have been exactly the same thing. They would not have allowed him to speak. What's your response to
Right,
that?
so just to make sure everyone could hear it, Professor Newprint, good to see you, because we've known each other for decades, good to see you again. And I said that the mayor of Jerusalem, Nir Barkat, was a right-wing guy, and he's in Bibi's government. It wouldn't have mattered. We could have brought a left-wing Zionist, and it still would have been protested. I absolutely believe that to be the case, right? I self-identify as a progressive and a Zionist. A lot of people consider that an oxymoron. You can't be both of those. By definition, they don't go together. So that is one particular understanding or branding of anti-Zionism. You saw the picture of me next to the mayor. All right, so in the book, I describe that picture because I can't stand that man's politics at all. And that picture was taken at the offices of AIPAC, which is often seen on the more right-hand side of Zionism. And I'm just reflecting, how on earth did I end up in an AIPAC office getting my picture taken with Nir Barkat behind the flag of the US and Israel, right? That is just bonkers. And then I realized that that image really does tell the story of politics make strange bedfellows, right? That it took a whole lot for that moment to happen and have me smiling there next to him. And to me, we could almost deconstruct that image to figure it out. So I want to thank you all for listening, for openness, and I just appreciate it because this is one hell of a difficult topic for so many of us. So thank you.
I'll conclude on with one funny anecdote, which I can tell because I also have tenure. And it involves this question of whether American Jews are anti-Zionist by definition. And after the publication of Portnoy's complaint, if you haven't read, you really should, Philip Roth, the American Jewish writer, was being widely pilloried here in the United States. Some American Jews said he was a worse threat to the Jewish people than Goldman. And at this moment, Philip Roth was invited to visit Israel. This young, up-and-coming Jewish American writer. And he met with David Ben-Gurion. And Ben-Gurion invited Philip Roth to become an Israeli. And Roth said, there is a Jewish homeland, and it's spelled America. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you to our online audience. We'll see you all next week.